Okay, hear me out. I think the player might be a former orphan. And this isn't a new theory for me. I've actually been thinking about this for a long time. Like, all the way back in 2024, before Chapter 4 even released. I even talked about it back then. But at the time, I didn't have proof. I didn't know who the player was. I just knew there was something off, until now. So let's actually get into it. We know that at least a few of the toys recognize the player. Not all of them, but enough that it matters. Poppy knows us. Mommy Longlegs knows us. Mrs. Delight knows us. And that already tells us the player wasn't just some random employee who walked in one day. So here's what I think. The player was an orphan brought into play care, but they didn't stand out. They weren't special. They weren't impressive enough for the Bigger Bodies initiative. And they may have been too old by the time it really mattered. They didn't qualify. They didn't amount to anything in Playtime Co.'s eyes, just average. And because of that, I think they slipped through the cracks. But instead of being thrown out entirely, Playtime Co. may have offered them a job once they turned 18, especially if they didn't have proper schooling, didn't have family, didn't really have anywhere else to go. That would mean the player didn't just work at Playtime Co., they were raised there. And honestly, it might have been luck. Now we know the Hour of Joy happened in 1995. And while we know a lot of Bigger Bodies were made from kids who stood out, we don't really hear about many being made from kids around the same age as Matthew, who, just to clarify, is one of the boys inside Doughy. That matters, because it suggests that if you were older and didn't qualify, you were basically just left behind. Or if you weren't good enough, then you weren't, at that time, turned into anything. So the player could have been someone who wasn't allowed back into play care once they aged out, but instead got moved upstairs, higher floors, possibly shipping, which would actually make a lot of sense, especially since it's well known that Rich, the head of shipping, treated his workers like family. That would explain two things at once: why the player felt such a strong attachment to play care, and why the toys mostly knew of us, even if they weren't close to us. And here's where it gets darker. I think the player may have been used as an example for the children to look up to, seeing how our player didn't stand out, yet still have a place to go. Like, look, they were just like you. They didn't get chosen, but now they work on the top floor. They have a home. They have a place to go. That kind of messaging would explain why the orphans weren't worried. It would also explain why Dewey, despite being older than many of the kids who did become Bigger Bodies, and other kids in general, never really talk about wanting to leave play care to go outside. It also explains why Poppy calls us perfect. It's because we weren't the absolute best or perfect, which is what makes us so unique. For all our flaws, we have a ground base of knowledge and understanding. And from the kids' point of view, leaving didn't look scary. It looked hopeful, like they still had a place at playtime. Now let's talk about Mommy Longlegs. She was around 9 years old when she was turned in 1991. And her relationship to the player is neutral. She doesn't seem fond of us, but she doesn't hate us either. Which actually makes sense if the player was older and not really involved with her. If they'd already moved on. If they didn't care much at the time. She even separates us from the others when she talks to us.
But you worked here.
That line implies she knew us, but only briefly. Mrs. Delight does something similar. Her tone toward us feels like she's talking to a past student. She's not looking down on us because we aren't her concern anymore, but she's not fond of us either. We're just a leftover. So here's a huge question. Why has no one come looking for the player? If the player had another job, a wife, kids, someone would have noticed when they didn't come home. An employer would wonder why their worker never showed up. Police would be involved. Therapy, interviews, questions. But none of that happens. And I think that's because the player was an orphan. No family. No one to report them missing. Their only real connections were inside Playtime Co. And those people either died or were never officially recorded. They might not have even been on the books as a proper employee. Playtime Co. could have housed them near Playcare, paid them quietly, and then just let them exist. Which also explains something else. The note. We know the player didn't take it with them. It's not in their inventory. If they were just a normal worker, they probably would have handed everything over to the police and never looked back. But the player doesn't do that, because this wasn't just where they worked, it was where they grew up. They had sentimental attachments, not intense ones, but enough. Enough to recognize Poppy, enough to care. And Poppy recognizes that too. She doesn't know what the player is capable of, which is why she calls us perfect. We're not a toy. We weren't part of the experiments. We knew the company, but we weren't involved in creating the monsters. And that also explains why the player wasn't there during the hour of joy. I don't think that was luck. I think it was intentional. Someone may have warned them. A note, a quiet comment, something subtle that stopped them from coming in that day. And Harley Sawyer wouldn't have cared. He only noticed kids who fit his dream, kids who stood out. Someone average who didn't qualify? Forgettable. And this ties directly into MOB's newest lore drop. The female scientist we see with Preston. She was also an orphan, also raised entirely within the system. But unlike the player, she joined the Young Geniuses program. She became cold, detached, and lost her humanity. She didn't just participate, she enjoyed it. We literally see her psychologically torture Catnap, breaking him down until he's lifeless and stripped of his identity. So, if the experiments wanted revenge on everyone, innocent and guilty, why wasn't the player there? Because we were one of them. They didn't cross that line. So yeah, former orphan, raised in play care, overlooked, spared. Let me know if I missed anything, or if you agree or disagree down below. There probably was a better way to explain this, but that's theories for you. Thanks for watching.